The island nation of New Zealand in shock and searching for answers after a gunman opens fire on worshippers there, killing at least 49 people in 2 mosques during Friday prayers. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. Horrible news. I'm Sandra Smith.
I'm Bill Hemmer. Sandra, good morning to you. Police have arrested and charged one man with murder. Apparently, 2 other armed suspects are now in custody. The terror unfolding in the town of Christchurch. That's the largest city on New Zealand's South Island. Sustained gunfire sending people running for their lives.
I saw one gun in the floor, and police were to stop in here. There was a lot of people die, injured.
Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt picks up our coverage from our West Coast newsroom from there. Jonathan, hello.
Good morning, Bill. This was an attack aimed deliberately at Muslims. A gunman live streaming the massacre via a camera mounted on his head. We are not showing any of that video at this point, but I have watched it for the sake of our reporting. It shows the gunman driving calmly toward a mosque, playing music, talking to himself, saying, "Let's get this party started." He then takes weapons from his trunk. He walks toward the mosque, which was filling up for Friday prayers. He opens fire, gunning down at least 2 men at the doorway. Then he walks inside. He shoots every single person he can see. He reloads several times and at one point goes back into a room where 2 large groups are laying on the floor, many of them clearly already dead, some just wounded. And he walks calmly around, taking kill shots, finishing off his victims with head or body shots. Once he leaves the mosque, he shoots several people on the street, including a woman wearing traditional Muslim dress. She is wounded. She lies on the street crying out for help. The gunman walks up to her and once again delivers the final shot directly to her head. He then gets back in his car, drives over that woman, and continues to shoot other people from his vehicle. The video stops after about 16 gut-wrenching minutes. The man on the video also left what New Zealand authorities describe as a manifesto online. In it, he describes himself as a 28-year-old Australian citizen. He talks about intimidating and repelling what he repeatedly calls Muslim invaders. He says mass immigration is a threat to civilization, and he says he supports President Trump as a symbol of renewed white identity and common purpose. Police now have at least 3 people in custody, one of whom apparently is seen arrested on this video, none of whom, according to officials, had been on their terrorism radar in either New Zealand or Australia. The Prime Minister said New Zealand is a proud melting pot of ethnicities and languages, and she had a message for the attackers and for the citizens of her country.
We share common values, and the one that we place the currency on right now and tonight is our compassion and the support for the community of those directly affected by this tragedy. And secondly, the strongest possible condemnation of the ideology of the people who did this. You may have chosen us, but we utterly reject and condemn you.
The gunman who live-streamed this horrific attack also said in this apparent manifesto that he hoped he would go to trial where he would plead not guilty because in his view he was taking action against an occupying force. Leaders around the world have refuted that idea, saying it was an act of pure hate, pure evil. Bill, I know that you know Christchurch. I lived there for 10 months post 9/11. They are good people. It is a very peaceful city. It is 4 a.m. Saturday morning there right now. And the people of Christchurch will tomorrow wake up to a whole new reality.
It's going to be a long period of grieving. Jonathan Hunt, thank you for that. Jonathan Hunt, West Coast Newsroom there in L.A. Thanks.
President Trump set to use the first veto of his presidency after 12 Republican senators sided with Democrats to block the president's declaration of a national emergency at the border. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer saying Congress will not succumb to president's, quote, monarchical leanings. I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
Today's votes cap a week of something the American people haven't seen enough of in the past 2 years. Both parties in the United States Congress standing up to Donald Trump. In 2 days, Congress has delivered three major rebukes to the president and stood up for transparency, accountability, and the constitutional powers.
All right. Well, that was Chuck Schumer. Let's bring in Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace. He's getting ready for the weekend. Chris, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Sandra.
As you see what is happening here, you wonder what this does to the party, to the Republican Party, Chris.
Well, I think we have to put this in context. This is less of a policy debate and more of a process debate, even a constitutional debate. Those 12 Republican senators who went against the president were not opposing his policy on building the wall. We're not opposing his policy on immigration. They were opposing the idea of asking Congress for money, being rejected for that money, and then declaring a national emergency to take the money anyway. So this was more a vote of standing up for the Senate, standing up for the separation of powers. But as Chuck Schumer said, there have been several cases now. In the case of Republicans, in the Senate specifically, there have been 3 in the last month. Last month, over 40 Republican senators voted against the president's plan to pull all U.S. troops out of Syria. That led him to change course and leave 400 there. And the day before the vote on the emergency declaration, 7 Republican senators sided with Democrats to vote against the president's support for the Saudi effort in Yemen. So this is an indication of some willingness on the part of some Republicans on some issues to go against the president. I think there is one other point I would make, though, Sandra. There are 10 Republican senators who were up for re-election in 2020. Of those, 9 voted with the president. The only one who's up for re-election and faces voters within a year is Susan Collins of Maine. So only one of the 10 who's going to actually face voters in the next year or 18 months went against the president yesterday.
Interesting. On this, here's at least one Republican senator, Lindsey Graham.
Prevail, his veto will be sustained. Maybe we can change the statute in the future to help alleviate some of the concerns, but I just want my colleagues to know I appreciate and respect your concerns, but I don't share them. To me, this statute allows the president to use military construction in a national emergency, and I think we have one.
So that was Lindsey Graham, Chris. I'm sure this is going to be a big thing on Sunday when you've got your guests joining you, but you just wonder ultimately what this says about the party as we look forward to 2020. Final thoughts on this before we move on to the next topic.
Yeah, I think that the point that those other senators, the 12 who disagree with Lindsey Graham, would make is it is one thing, and this has happened before. It happened after 9/11. It happened with George H.W. Bush, Bush 41, after 9/11. Or rather in the Gulf War. It's one thing when there is a real emergency and you sit there and you say, look, we need to spend money or do something because there's an emergency. This is the first time it had ever been done where a president went to Congress, asked for something, was denied it by Congress, and then decided to declare a national emergency so he could spend the money anyway. And that's what I think those 12 senators were opposing, because in Article 1 of the Constitution, it gives Congress the power of the purse.
All right, I want to get now to Nancy Pelosi and what's happening with her party, Chris, because it seems she's trying to check some of these more progressive Democrats within her own party. And Mark Thiessen's writing about this. Here's his headline. It's Pelosi versus Ocasio-Cortez, Omar Tlaib in the battle to control the Democratic Party. In that piece, Mark Thiessen writes, quote, during a private meeting this week, Pelosi reportedly asked House Democrats, do we want to drag him down or do we want to lift people up? The answer from the resistance is becoming clear. Drag him down. It is really something to watch as Nancy Pelosi tries to lead her party.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, I don't think you should overstate it. Just as there is a split, and you're seeing some Republicans now on some specific issues going against the president, there is a difference of approach. I think there's more that unites Democrats than divides them. But there's clearly a difference of approach here. And there are some younger freshmen or people that have only been there for a couple of years who are further to the left and are demanding more immediate change. And Pelosi, whose primary job is to protect the House majority, doesn't want to move too far too fast. And particularly on this one issue of impeachment, I think she feels, as somebody who was in Congress in 1998 and saw how it backlashed on Republicans when they impeached Bill Clinton, thinks that unless there's overwhelming evidence, there's a smoking gun and there's some bipartisan buy-in, that a move by the House majority, and they would have the votes to do it, to impeach the president, could end up very much hurting them in 2020.
There's no doubt there's several of those freshman lawmakers who are grabbing most of the headlines. I want to finally ask you, because, and kind of spring this on you, because we are awaiting the president. He is about to be leaving the White House any moment now, Chris. He's on his way to meet with national security members to discuss the future, obviously. He's going to be heading to the Pentagon a short time from now, we're told. On this Friday morning, Chris, it has been a big week for this president. A lot going on, news in Israel overnight, as we await the president and him meeting with those from the national security team and meeting at the Pentagon. Sort of your thoughts as we look at these live pictures here, awaiting the president's departure and arrival at the Pentagon.
Well, look, there are a lot of issues. Obviously, it's not especially new. It happened again, but we've seen these missiles going from Gaza into Israel before. I think the biggest news on the foreign policy front, well, here I'll speak quickly because the president's about to get out, is North Korea, which is now threatening to end the talks, threatening to resume nuclear testing, missile testing, which would be a tremendous setback if it happens and isn't just talk, to the president and his efforts to make a deal with Chairman Kim. So he's got a lot on his foreign policy plate. And I got that all done before the president opens his car door.
And you did it, and here he comes. So he's going to be meeting with his national security officials at the Pentagon. The president, obviously, this is also as North Korea threatens to end nuclear talks. Any news that comes from this, I'm sure you'll be discussing on your program this weekend. Chris Wallace, I'll thank you and bring Bill in here as we see the president arriving at the Pentagon this morning. We didn't know whether he would stop at cameras and answer questions of reporters. It looks like he'll be walking right in.
White House put out a statement, Sarah Sanders, about what's happening in New Zealand a bit earlier today, and we were thinking we might get a comment there, and it still may happen, so we're watching that. And the point that Wallace makes there at the end about North Korea is very well taken when you consider Mike Pompeo at a press conference today at the State Department, and he was asked about this repeatedly, Sandra, about, what is Chairman Kim up to? And Pompeo said that Chairman Kim said several times in Hanoi that he would not restart his program or fire rockets or missiles or test an ICBM. But there is clear concern about that based on the reporting that we've watched over the past week.
So, Chris, you're still with us. The president just arriving at the Pentagon. You also saw in that live picture there Vice President Mike Pence joining him, along with Acting Defense Secretary Pat Shanahan, as we know, will be joining him, as well as other top officials, General Joseph Dunford, and other members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Is Chris with us? No, not anymore? Okay, tune into Fox News Sunday to see the latest from Chris Wallace.
You can find him then, and
yeah,
you can see
I'm
him
here.
right
there he is.
All right, make it quick.
Chris, let us know what's coming up.
Well, yes, we are going to be talking, and there you see it. I was hoping you were going to introduce him, because this is a tough name to say. Pete Buttigieg. He is the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. He's one of the candidates, one of the 300 candidates for president on the Democratic side. He's the young, really young one, 37 years old.
Good stuff.
Rhodes Scholar, veteran of Afghanistan. We're going to be talking to him on Sunday.
We'll see you then. Stick safe and a beauty, by the way, Chris. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to get back to this news now, the continuing coverage of this horrific shooting from New Zealand. In a moment, an update as to what we're learning at the moment. 49 dead, 2 mosques hit. Mercedes Schlapp from the White House is live next.
New Zealand now on high alert after the worst terror attack in that nation's history. 49 innocent people killed as a gunman opens fire on 2 mosques during Friday prayers. Let's bring in Mercedes Schlapp, Director of Strategic Communications for President Trump. Mercedes, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Just horrible news overnight. The president tweeted out his sympathies. How is the president reacting this morning? We just saw him arrive at the Pentagon. Clearly, he's been briefed on the situation. What is he saying on this?
Yeah, I just spoke with the president. He made it very clear this is an act of terror. This is a horrific, evil crime, especially targeting these innocent lives at a place of worship. And again, we condemn this. We stand with the families, the people of New Zealand, and the president will be reaching out this afternoon to the Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Okay, so there will be a phone call with the Prime Minister?
That is right, and our White House officials have been in contact with their counterparts in New Zealand. We have offered full cooperation and help in providing that support in this investigation. It's just a horrific day for the people of New Zealand, and we pray with them during this very difficult time.
Okay. And Kirstjen Nielsen, Homeland Security, saying no specific or credible threat to our homeland at this time, but Americans should remain vigilant. So no plans to change our security threat here at home based on what happened?
That's correct. Secretary Nielsen spoke about or tweeted about this, that at this point we are not seeing threats here at the homeland. Obviously, we'll continue to monitor the situation. Our point here is also to ensure that New Zealand has what it needs to make sure that they get through this investigation. Obviously, such a sad day in New Zealand from this horrific individual that has created such evil in this town in New Zealand.
And our thoughts and prayers are and continue to be with New Zealand and all the people affected there. Meanwhile, I've got to get to this on our border and the national emergency the president declared at our southern border. 12 senators decided to break with the president on his declaration, voting to end his border emergency. What is the president's next move, Mercedes?
Well, the president, I think, said it in one word in his tweet, and that was a veto. It's very clear that we have a national emergency at the border. We've gone from a point that it's gone from being a crisis to an emergency, looking at the fact that our career Border Patrol agents and officials need these resources. They're spending more time processing illegal aliens right now than they are being able to monitor and provide the work that they need to secure the border. And so in essence, we know one thing, and that is that walls work, that these physical barriers work. Even Democrats agree. And so we need these necessary resources to ensure that we're able to build new wall, repair walls as well, and also be able to control the situation that we're seeing at the border.
Chuck Schumer put out a response saying that this sends a strong message to the president that under our Constitution, the executive branch, the legislative branch are co-equal, that the framers of the Constitution, the U.S., has no king, and we never will. How did the White House respond to that?
Well, that's so ironic because when President Obama actually rewrote immigration law when it came to DACA, Senator Schumer supported the president. He said nothing. Here, where we know that the president has the authority given by Congress based on these statutes to declare a national emergency. As we know, presidents have declared about 60 national emergencies since 1976. It's just ironic that Senator Schumer now has decided to basically make this a political issue. And what we know about these Democrats is they stand for three things. They're united on killing babies, on socialism, and on open borders. They're very united on not fixing this problem that we're seeing at the border. We've seen apprehensions continually increase. The primary source of where drugs are coming in is through the southern border.
Sorry,
and we need these changes.
We're short on time here, Mercedes. We're going to leave it there. Mercedes Schlapp at the White House. Appreciate it.
Part of our investigation will to look back at every possibility to ensure that we in law enforcement and security didn't miss any opportunities to prevent this horrendous event.
They are in the very early moments of this investigation, too, that's going to go on for some time. That's the police commission out of New Zealand, reacting to the deadliest mass shooting in that country's history. In Christchurch, 49 are dead. Gunmen opened fire inside of 2 mosques during Friday prayers. Today, extra security around many mosques in the U.S. as a precaution. Joey Jones, retired U.S. Marine Corps bomb technician. And Joey, nice to see you again. Tough news to wake up to.
It is. It's an absolute tragedy. I mean, these are nearly 50 lives that we can't get back.
Yeah, and you were on TV really before the sun came up here in the U.S. And what do you think about this right now?
Well, I think the first thing is that the effort that this channel is doing and the majority of media to not give this person a platform is commendable, and I hope that it sets an example that we follow.
He wants a platform.
Exactly.
Desperately, based on the streaming
Yes.
video that he provided online and the fact that he wanted to get through it alive.
Well, and this is a new issue, right? Is there responsibility to be had among social media and things of that nature? I don't believe so, but I think that it's a hard look from everyone, that someone can go in and perhaps maybe even be inspired by the fact that you could use social media for something like this.
Back to the police commissioner from Christchurch. Watch here.
We never assume that there aren't other people involved. That's why we've got a immense presence out there across Canterbury and right across New Zealand. But we don't have named or identified people that we're looking for. But it would be wrong to assume that there is no one else.
So we were told 4 people are in custody. Maybe the numbers grows, maybe it does not. But apparently this killer moved from Australia to the South Island of New Zealand to carry out this killing.
Well, and so right now what we have to look at is are there copycats along the way? Is there something in our country that we need to worry about? The fact that these people, there are 4 people connected to this, and like you said, the number could grow. But the idea that we need to look at the security in our home now, and that New Zealand has to heal, but also make sure that something like this doesn't happen tomorrow or the next day. You know, we have our debates about guns. They have their own gun culture. They use it for a lot of things down there. But as a bomb tech, I can tell you, Oklahoma City didn't need a gun to kill a lot of people. And so to, you know, strengthen our security, utilize our force protection, and then look at, are people using social media? Are they putting out signs that we know, hey, this is what they want to do? They want to instill terror through social media. And so for me as a military person, someone that's worked in force protection, my mind goes from, okay, let's mourn these people and honor them, but also let's make sure there aren't any more that stack up with this, and we find everyone that might be involved or inspired.
Joey, it's great to see you, and thank you for your wisdom.
Absolutely, thank you.
Appreciate it. Sandra.
The FDA taking new action to prevent young people from picking up e-cigarettes. The agency's outgoing commissioner, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, is here to talk about that.
Sandra, also in a moment, there's a new focus on Google's work in China. Top U.S. officials say the internet giant may inadvertently be helping China's military.
U.S. defense officials slamming Google for its work with China, saying it indirectly helps the Chinese military. This coming after the tech giant recently dropped a bid for a project with the Defense Department. Jennifer Griffin's live from the Pentagon with more on this. Jennifer.
Hi, Sandra. Well, President Trump is right now down the hall from us, meeting in the secure conference room known as the Tank with his top national security advisors. He's getting a briefing on worldwide threats hours after the mass shooting in New Zealand. The debate over business practices of tech companies like Facebook and Google was front and center yesterday at a heated hearing on the Hill.
You're telling me that Google, an American company, supposedly, is refusing to work with the Department of Defense, but is doing work in with China in China.
The work that Google is doing in China is indirectly benefiting the Chinese military. In fact, the way I described it to our industry partners is, look, we're the good guys. And frankly, indirect may be not a full characterization of the way it really is. It's more of a direct benefit to the Chinese military.
In his first testimony as acting Defense Secretary, Patrick Shanahan, who's also meeting with the president right now, a former Boeing executive, explained further.
$5 trillion of their economy is state-owned enterprises. So the technology that is developed in the civil world transfers to the military world. It's a direct pipeline. Not only is there a transfer, there's also systemic theft of U.S. technology.
A few Google whistleblowers recently leaked what they claim to be evidence that Google is working with China to release a censored search engine that would assist Chinese surveillance efforts. And last summer, Google canceled a $10 billion cloud contract with the U.S. military, citing a violation of the company's ethical guidelines. We reached out to Google for comment and were directed to previous statements in which they said they would continue working with the U.S. government, but that big contract known as, was canceled, as well as another known as Project Maven, which had to do with drones. Back to you, Sandra.
Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. As you mentioned, the president there receiving his security briefing.
In the meantime, the FDA is cracking down on teen vaping, issuing new guidelines to prevent minors from buying flavored e-cigarettes. It's a big issue. It's spreading quickly. The outgoing FDA commissioner is Dr. Scott Gottlieb, and the doctor is with me now. Sir, how are you, and good morning?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
First of all, why are you leaving the job?
You know, this is one of the toughest decisions I've made in my professional career. I love this job. I've been commuting it from Connecticut. I have 3 young children. I basically spent 2 years where I was only home a day a week, and it just got very difficult. I feel we've done a lot in 2 years. I feel I'm leaving behind a very good team and platform to continue doing the policies that we've been implementing. So I feel good about where things are right now.
As you walk away, then, do you think you will be able? Do you consider your term there effective, Doctor?
Well, absolutely. I think there's a lot that we accomplished already in the time that I've been there. I think the policies that we've implemented will have an impact on, you know, the issues of the day, the opioid crisis. We've advanced policies to promote innovation in medical products. And I feel like the policies we're leaving behind with respect to tobacco and the issue you're talking about right now in the e-cigarettes have broad consensus within the White House, the administration. The secretary is very strong on these issues. So I feel these will get fully implemented and will have an impact on addressing some of these challenges.
I'm looking at some of these numbers. 3.6 million middle and high school students used e-cigarettes in the past month. That goes back to 2018. Why has this become so addictive so quickly?
Well, look, it's an epidemic right now of youth use of these e-cigarette products. It's become a very fashionable item among teens and children, and this is going to be hard to reverse. We implemented policies, we announced policies that will put in place dramatically increased age verification requirements for the fruit e-cigarettes that are bought in convenience stores or sold online. Those are the ones that the kids are primarily abusing. But we make no mistake about the fact that this is going to be a real challenge to reverse these trends. They came on very fast. We were shocked by the data when we got this data late in 2018. And if we can't start reversing these trends this year and don't see these rates start to come down, we'll have to take more dramatic action. And we think we know the actions we'll have to take. We'll have to look at the pod-based e-cigarettes, the cartridge-based products as a category, and potentially take them off the market if we can't start to bring down these youth use rates, because it's simply at intolerable levels.
What's the time frame on that, do you believe?
We're in the field right now with the 2019 National Youth Tobacco Survey. I think if that survey comes back, and we'll have those results in August of 2019, if that shows another 30, 40, 50% increase of e-cigarette use among kids on top of the 78% increase that we saw last year in high school students and the 50% increase in middle school students, I think we'll have to look at actions that would address this as a category, and not just certain products, but the entire category of the pod-based products. We believe they have utility for helping currently addicted adult smokers quit combustible tobacco and transition to something that doesn't have all the same risks as smoking cigarettes. But against this backdrop of all this youth use, we might conclude that they don't have enough redeeming public health value to continue to be on the market without approved applications.
What is the impact? Take the body of a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid. What's the impact on their body, the impact on their brain, do you believe, at the moment?
Well, look, first of all, nicotine's an addictive substance, so kids are becoming addicted to nicotine. Some proportion of these kids will become smokers. They'll migrate back onto regular cigarettes, and will reverse all the dramatic gains we've made in reducing smoking rates among children, which is one of the greatest public health achievements of modern time. But we also know that nicotine has a direct effect on the lungs of children, and we also know that these e-vapors aren't harmless. We've seen evidence now in humans as well as in animal studies that they do have effects on the lung. Something that's less harmful than smoking doesn't mean that it's safe. We believe these products are less harmful than smoking, and for a currently addicted adult smoker who can quit cigarettes by migrating onto an e-cigarette, they're probably having a positive impact on their health, and maybe a significant impact on their health. But for a child who hasn't been initiated on nicotine, who we don't want that child to become a smoker, there's no redeeming value of these e-cigarettes being used by children, and we simply can't allow these trends.
The point on that, then, medically, physically speaking, is that the adult already has the addiction, and the child or the teenager does not yet. And that's
right,
your target.
And there's people who think somehow, well, my kid's not smoking, so it's not so bad. Well, the e-cigarettes aren't safe, and they do have a direct effect on the health of the child, including a direct effect on a developing brain, on an adolescent brain and a teenager's brain.
Yeah. I'm out of time, but thank you for yours today. Can you state that the administration is unequivocally behind this push that you're doing now?
Absolutely. This has strong support from the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar, and strong support from the White House. And in fact, they put out supportive statements yesterday. I don't think anyone in this administration wants to see kids becoming addicted to nicotine and becoming smokers.
I know you have your critics. We'll see if they win or not. Dr. Scott Gottlieb, thank you for your time today. My best to you in your new life, back with your family in Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you.
The last American diplomats leaving Venezuela, but promising to continue to help the people of that country as tensions there escalate between Washington and the socialist regime of Nicolas Maduro.
Also, there is more fallout in that college admissions scandal involving two high-profile actresses. Might be just the beginning of this story. Parents and students who say they applied the right way now filing class action lawsuits. So do they have a case? Another alert here, 18 before the hour. Fox News alert on the political crisis in Venezuela. Mike Pompeo today revealing the U.S. has pulled all of our personnel out of Caracas. He says American diplomats remain committed to helping the people in that country as they grapple with power outages and shortages of food and water. With Brian Kilmeade, here is Secretary Pompeo today.
Boy, when I think about how bad it is today and what I know it's going to be like tomorrow and the day after that, it's going to get worse. The Maduro regime is truly evil, denying food to the hungry, denying medicine to the sick. We've delivered. The American people have been so generous, 200 metric tons of food on their borders they won't let in. We are continuing to take effort.
In the meantime, the opposition leader Juan Guaido tweeting this, quote, "We insist on helping the most vulnerable. Yesterday, we managed to deliver donations in hospitals while the regime blocks and burns food and medicine. We are going to help our people. With the cessation, usurpation, not only will humanitarian aid enter, we will defeat poverty." So back and forth it goes. And Mike Pompeo been a strong advocate on this issue from day one. We'll see whether or not in time they can be successful. But Maduro has shown that he's a fighter and will hold on as long as he can.
We'll continue to watch that story and this. 7 students and parents filing a federal class action lawsuit against schools and individuals named in the college admissions scandal, claiming the admissions process was warped and rigged by fraud, allowing unqualified students to attend while those who played by the rules were unfairly treated. Let's bring in Emily Campagno, attorney and Fox News contributor. Emily, good morning to you. So how do you prove damages in these type of lawsuits?
Honestly, I think that's the hardest part that these plaintiffs have before them and the weakest part of their argument, because you really can't. They are arguing both that their degrees are subsequently devalued because of the scandal associated with these universities, as well as the fact that they were subjected to this unfair process and that their education is somehow diminished. And they're requesting both their application fees returned and, in one of those class actions, literally a $500 billion judgment, which is astronomical and frankly unfounded. The reason why it's so hard is because, let's just take Stanford, for example. This entering freshman class, they accepted 4% last fall, a record low. Of the rejected students, 8,000 had perfect ACTs and perfect GPAs. So it's impossible for these students to prove that they would be one of the accepted ones, and subsequently that their degrees from these still elite universities were undervalued in some way.
This is how the class is defined. Quote, a class is initially defined as follows: all individuals who, between 2012 and 2018, applied to UCLA, USC, USD, Stanford University, UT, Texas at Austin, Wake Forest University, Georgetown University, or Yale University, paid an admission application fee to one or more of these universities with respect to an admission application that was rejected by the university. So you paid, you went through the process, you did it the right way, you got rejected. So they're making the case that they're owed what?
Their application fee. And for example, for Yale, it's $70. I think the universities have kind of two options here. They can either quickly settle this, return everyone's application fees, and be done, or they can kind of counter it with some type of PR approach that says, look, we have nothing to do with and are totally attenuated from these rogue coaches and advisors who let these students in the side door. And criminally, that's exactly what these universities are saying, right? They're not among those charged. They're not targeted. And so they're going to say, we had nothing to do with this. The strongest argument these students have, frankly, is that the universities should have known. They should have known there was a rogue employee there. But the fact that these employees were separate from the university in terms of their kind of malicious intent, that's the best thing the U has going for them. And it kind of, in their cost-benefit analysis, it's how much do they spend defending these suits versus just settling it and being done.
Prosecutors are making the case that the universities are victims in this criminal case. Some say the university should have known about it. There should have been enough clues, enough evidence to know this was going on. Where do things stand when it comes to that?
Exactly. That's what the students are arguing here, that the universities should have known what was going on within their four corners of their walls, and that the kind of sanctity and infallibility of this application process was subsequently defiled, right? The universities should have known. But that being said, that's the strongest argument the universities have in their defense, is the fact that the DOJ specifically said they were victims too. So they can utilize that in their civil cases to say, we had nothing to do with this whatsoever, and therefore they will move to dismiss. And frankly, these suits, especially that $500 billion one, likely won't go far in the courts.
It's interesting to see some of the remorse from those that were involved in this highly complicated, well played out scheme. It went on for quite some time. Mark Riddell was one of those that took tests on the students' behalf to get the best test scores possible. He put out a statement saying, quote, "I'm profoundly sorry for the damage I've done and grief I have caused those as a result of my needless actions. I understand how my actions contributed to a loss of trust in the college admissions process." Certainly an admission on his part there. I just wonder how strong their case is and how this is all going to go in court. And it seems like they're just scratching the surface as far as really the damages here, because if you were denied from a university, I mean, just the cost of the application process is one thing, but denied from the university and went somewhere else, paid to apply there because you didn't get in there. I mean, it's like, where does this end, I guess, is my final question.
Right. It seems like the possibilities are endless and limitless, certainly in terms of these students' arguments. Really quickly, just on that criminal side, though, you know, Singer, the ringleader, immediately after he was wired and agreed to be a cooperating witness, he informed everyone else in that ring, and that's why he was also charged with obstruction of justice, which was an additional 10 years. Those charges of conspiracy to commit mail fraud and honest services mail fraud that those parents are facing, those are 20-year sentences. So that's why the DOJ has such leverage. So moving forward, these students certainly have a lot of arguments. It's a slippery slope, but again, the more distance the university has between these criminal charges and their culpability, the better their defense is for these civil class actions.
The more things we learn about this, you realize just how deep this scandal did run. Emily, thank you on all of that this morning.
Thank you, Sandra. Have a great day.
In a moment here is organized crime making a comeback here in New York City. Reports of an all-out mob war brewing after a Gambino family boss was gunned down outside of his home. We'll get a live report on where that stands today. Next.
He has a conversation with an individual in front of that residence, and that individual at some point in time, it's only about a minute into it, pulls out a firearm.
The reputed Gambino crime boss, Francesco Frankie Boy Cali, was gunned down outside of his home on Staten Island here in New York City over the week. This past week, raising concerns about a violent power struggle for control of organized crime in New York City. Rick Leventhal has been looking into this, and he's live in studio with more now. Here, Rick.
And Bill, if you've seen the Godfather films, some of what's happening here in real life may sound familiar. A mob boss gunned down in cold blood, a power struggle between families, and a strong Sicilian connection. The murder happened Wednesday night in Staten Island, New York. The Daily Beast is reporting the victim, Gambino boss Frank Cali, was lured from his home by the hitman who backed a truck into Cali's Cadillac. The gunman hands Cali his license plate, which had fallen off, and when Cali turns to put the plate back on his car, the gunman fires a dozen shots, hitting him at least 6 times. That hit was captured on surveillance video, which may be a first. Cali's family reportedly refused to turn over that security footage to the NYPD. So the cops came back with a search warrant, and they're now reviewing the video.
I won't get too deep into it, but whether it was an altercation or a conversation, that remains to be seen. But he has a conversation with an individual in front of that residence, and that individual at some point in time, it's only about a minute into it, pulls out a firearm and shots.
The Cali faction reportedly has close ties to Sicily, and this could be a power struggle to bring control back to the states. Now, this is the first boss to be killed in New York since Paul Castellano was gunned down outside the Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan back in 1985. A Gotti family associate was suspected in that crime, and this week's hit may be tied to Gene Gotti. Released from federal prison last September for dealing heroin, Gene took over for his brother, John Gotti, who died of cancer in prison. Police at this hour say they haven't found the gunman or the blue truck he was driving, and there are concerns that this murder could spark an all-out gang war right here in New York City, Bill.
Something to watch. Indeed you will. Thank you, Rick. Nice to see you. Rick Leventhal here in New York. Thanks.
Well, a nation in mourning as New Zealand suffers the worst terror attack in its history. 49 gunned down during morning prayers at 2 mosques. The latest on the suspect and his possible motives next.